Hey everybody, I'm stand-up comedian Dan Donohue, and when I'm not doing stand-up, I'm usually at home watching stuff. And some of that stuff sucks, and some of that stuff is okay. And some of that stuff is worth a watch. I'm going to be covering some of the things I have seen that are worth a watch. That's it. That's the whole idea. This is not a takedown video. This does not involve or include Mr. Beast or Joe Rogan in any way. I just watch stuff, and sometimes I like it, and sometimes I think some of that stuff is funny, and I'm going to be talking about it. The first video I'm going to talk about is Stonehenge, the Lost Circle Revealed.
Stonehenge, Britain's wonder of the world.
They really got after it with that title. They really tried to make Stonehenge clickbait with that title. And you might think, Stonehenge? You mean that big pile of rocks in Europe? And it's like, yeah, sure, but please hear me out about this documentary. This documentary wants to be a documentary about Stonehenge, but really it's a documentary about the weird, lovable people that are obsessed with Stonehenge.
Although my work involves many different aspects, many different countries, Stonehenge, I think, really got its hooks into me.
After watching this documentary, I am convinced Stonehenge was a prank. Prehistoric Stone Age people got together and said, wouldn't it be funny if in the future there are archaeologists? And wouldn't it be funny if those archaeologists had to figure out why we made a big pile of rocks in the middle of Salisbury Plain?
I remember coming here as a child and wondering what it was for, and thinking that somebody must have the answer.
Obviously, Stonehenge is much more impressive than that. The stones are huge, and the question is, how did people move those stones from one place to another? Stonehenge has consumed the entire lives of some archaeologists.
Archaeologists have spent whole lifetimes trying to get to the bottom of it.
I want you to think about that. Stone Age people made a monument that has consumed the lives of modern people. Initially, that idea is so sad to me. I really hope I didn't do anything in my life that will cause future archaeologists to use their entire lives to figure it out. Why did a young boy in 2008 in Cape Cod make a small hole used to conceal objects? It was me, and it was to hide porn. Please, let this be known. And it made me sad to think about until I saw Dr. Mike Parker Pearson.
The blue stones are much smaller than the great big stones of Stonehenge. They're generally not much bigger than the human frame.
This dude was built to study Stonehenge.
And as you can guess from the weather conditions, some of it's been quite hard work.
Yeah.
The ecstasy on his face when he looks at and touches those rocks is unparalleled by any drug user I know. Dr. Mike wants to figure out if Stonehenge was originally somewhere else and then moved to where it is now in Salisbury Plain. That's it. That's the whole thing. He dedicated years to figuring that out. And the presenter in the documentary, Elise Roberts, follows him around. Really quick, Elise Roberts does not stop walking this entire documentary.
Surely the most iconic and mysterious structure. This is the story of the lost circle of Stonehenge.
After all, this is a land of giants.
But the discovery of this monument throws up a new question.
Elise Roberts is terrified that if she stops moving for even a second, we will stop listening to her. Anyway, they talk about this myth that Merlin moved the stones that are now in Stonehenge, the wizard Merlin. He went to Ireland, which is called the Land of the Giants back then, I guess, which I guess no one traveled to Ireland to get that nickname.
It tells of the wizard Merlin, who led men far to the west, to Ireland, to the land of giants.
I am Irish and I have been to Ireland, and the only thing giant about the people in Ireland are their drinking and gambling problems. So anyway, the blue stones that are used in Stonehenge originated 150 miles away from where they are now, which is really confusing. Why did they move that far? Dr. Mike tries discovering this by driving through water for no reason.
On a search for their birthplace. Little did he know that he would discover something even more extraordinary.
So Dr. Mike calls on geologist Richard Bevins, who walks out of the darkness.
Geologist Richard Bevins has mapped and sampled hundreds of Preseli outcrops.
It is so fun. These people truly are just like one with the woods and the rocks they study. So anyway, they figure out that the stones from Stonehenge didn't come from where they originally thought they were. They were actually much further away. And they needed to figure out how these rocks were moved. Enter the experimental archaeologist.
James Dilley and Luke Winter are experimental archaeologists.
I don't think the United States puts enough funding into science because I've never met an experimental archaeologist. Like, I thought an experimental archaeologist would be a guy who experiments with archaeological tactics, like he would try digging up dinosaur bones with a rubber chicken or something, but no. These guys experiment with how ancient people did things that we can only speculate on.
They create and construct using materials and techniques available to Stone Age people.
Throughout the documentary, these guys are like digging stuff up with bones because that's what ancient people did, and my whole being shattered into frustration. Maybe it was just like my dad's voice when he used to fix things coming in my head, but I was just like, use a drill, asshole.
Today we're going to attempt to pull this with school children. Obviously, we doubt whether the Preseli stones were moved by children. We don't know that, but we assume teams of adults, muscular, strong, fit people. So it's a real test.
Anyway, they show how people moved the stones from Stonehenge, which is really cool and really interesting, and for no reason they used children to demonstrate. Maybe all they could get was children, but if I'm a dad, I am not letting my children around experimental archaeologists.
Stone blade is actually housed inside this piece of red deer antler here.
So Dr. Mike finds all these other potential circles that could have been like mini Stonehenges in these small towns, and he does talks at microbreweries which are packed with people from that town.
All the activities sparked the interest of the locals. Mike's talks at the neighbourhood microbrewery were packed.
These people have nothing to do.
I think that is where the stone that ended up at Stonehenge was taken from.
Hey Ted, do you want to go back to the microbrewery? Dr. Mike is going to talk about stones for another 2 hours. Yeah! Sounds great. So they have this low point after that where they can't really find the stones that Stonehenge came from, and they're really frustrated.
The geophysics hadn't really produced very much. Didn't pick up anything. No sign of other holes where stones might have once stood.
Dr. Mike is never really friends. Dr. Mike always has the same expression. Dr. Mike, and I don't want to sexualize this beautiful man, he might be a little hard this whole documentary.
But it's also the sense of bringing a monument and putting it somewhere else.
But then they have a breakthrough because Tim goes underground. And it turns out Stonehenge was first built in the Welsh Hills and then moved. But we couldn't leave it there. We had to get another person with a job that definitely should not exist.
He calls in archaeoastronomer Clive Ruggles to examine the site.
I can't get a job at a restaurant, and these people are getting jobs as archaeoastronomers. Our economy is in the toilet. But they speculate that Stonehenge lines up with the rising and falling of the sun, and it is all very interesting and fascinating. But what's even more fascinating is what I concluded in watching this documentary. You see, the interest in Stonehenge all comes from the accomplishments of these Stone Age people. How were they able to move rocks like that? How are they able to get heavy rocks on top of each other without modern technology? But what's even more interesting to me is how much modern technology we need to employ to discover that stuff.
Bluestone samples from both Stonehenge and the Preseli outcrops were pulverised, transformed into the finest sand, then panned like gold to separate out the minerals.
We need archaeoastronomers. We need experimental archaeologists. And I think what's beautiful about Stonehenge is it shows us the limits of modern technology. Now, could my uncle with a backhoe make Stonehenge himself? Yeah, maybe. But with all the modern technology we have, it takes Dr. Mike years and years with all the technology at his disposal, and he still can't fully figure out everything he wants to about Stonehenge. I don't know. I think that's kind of beautiful. And I think what's said in the beginning of this documentary really is true. The mystery of Stonehenge is what makes it beautiful. Anyway, I hope that you watch it. Again, the documentary is called Stonehenge, The Lost Circle Revealed. I'm going to put a link down here. Please check out my channel if you enjoyed this. Please subscribe. And as always, have a good one.